What's up, everybody? This is Lenny Kaiser, Ableton certified trainer and instructor at Sequence 1 Music School. I'm excited to show you the project you'll be creating in our new online course, Advanced Music Production in Ableton Live 10. You'll produce this entire track from scratch. You'll learn sound design with Wavetable and Echo, make custom synth patches, fatten up your drums, work with 808s, and create futuristic leads and arps. Let's listen to the song. As you can see, this song only has 7 tracks, so I'm using a minimal number of elements to create a full-sounding song. You can achieve this in your production as well, and I'll show you how. It's just a combination of 3 things: effective sound design, creative arrangement and editing, and advanced mixing and mastering techniques. If you struggle to turn your loops into full songs or find yourself adding pointless sounds, tracks, and effects to your projects in an attempt to complete them, then this course will help you take your music production to the next level. Learn how to add the details and elements that will make your tracks sound professional. Alright guys, so we're about to get started with creating our song. So here's what we're going to do first. I'm going to write the chord progression with the default Wavetable preset to get started quickly. Then, in the rest of the videos in this chapter, I'll walk you through designing a custom Wavetable sound from scratch. This way, we'll have the chords written first so we can design the sound in Wavetable more effectively. Now, I'm going to load in the default Wavetable preset onto this blank MIDI track. Then, I'm going to change the project tempo to 95 beats per minute, and I'll turn on the metronome. You'll notice that I've also enabled the Enable Only While Recording option. This is going to make it so the metronome is only on when we're recording. So this song is written in the scale E Dorian. And the 4 chords that I use to make the chord progression are E minor, B minor, A major, and G major. I'm going to record the chords using the push, and if you can't follow along, don't worry because you can just use the project file for the next video and it will have the progression in a MIDI clip. So now I'm going to jump over to the push and change the scale to E and Dorian. And then I'm going to record in the chord progression. So now I'm going to click on that recording, hit Z to zoom to selection, and trim the end of the clip in. I'll double click into the clip. I'm going to change the timing of this last chord that I played and go ahead and do a quick quantize on the whole thing. I'm going to go ahead and make some edits here just to adjust the length of some of these chords that were played, so they're a little bit longer. Now I'm going to add some variation to the last two chords by adding a note 1 octave higher than the root note of each chord. This will help brighten them up and will stand out a tiny bit more in the chord progression. And now I'm going to even out the velocities of all the chords by highlighting them with Command A and then clicking and dragging while holding the Command modifier on a Mac or Control on a PC to even out those velocities. Okay, so now I'm going to turn the metronome off and fold the clip so we can look at the chords. And to make these chords sound a little bit more deep, I'm going to select them all with Command A and just take them down 1 octave by hitting Shift and the down arrows. So the chords that are playing in this chord progression are E minor, B minor, A major with a note layered 1 octave higher, and finally G major, which also has a note layered 1 octave higher than the root note of the chord. Now that the chords are written, in the next video, we'll start designing a custom wavetable sound for these chords. All right, in this video, we're going to start creating our custom sound in Wavetable for our chords. Just a quick reminder that this is an advanced course, and I'm assuming you have a working knowledge of Ableton and synthesis. Let's start shaping our sound by selecting a wavetable to work with. So to select a wavetable, in this first area here, we have all of our different categories of wavetables. So I'll go ahead and select vintage. And next to that, we can select the individual wavetable here. I'll choose JX10 Sync. All right, so let's go ahead and loop our clip real quick with Command L. And now that we've selected our wavetable, we can scrub through the wave position with this slider here. A couple things to point out. We can select different wavetables with these arrows here. And we can change the view of the visualization section with the linear or the polar buttons up here. We'll also notice that wavetable for each oscillator has a panning control. We can double click to set that back to center. And we also have a volume control for the oscillator. Cool. So let's mangle our wavetable a little bit by selecting one of the oscillator effects here. I'll go with modern. And we see now we have a warp percentage and a fold percentage. So these are going to apply phase distortion, in this case with the modern effect. And let's see what it does. Next, let's add a little bit of fold percentage here. All right, so let's add a second oscillator to our sound. So I'll click on the Oscillator 2 tab and turn it on. And let's choose the collection category and the wavetable Cobalt. And let's change the wave position. And that's starting to sound pretty good. So Wavetable has 2 oscillators, and it also has a sub-oscillator here, which you can turn on with this button. We have a gain control for the sub. We have a tone control. And we can choose what octave the sub is playing back in. So this will be lower. And for this sound, we're not going to use the sub oscillator. We also have a global transpose here. And we have semitone tuning. And detuning here. At this point, we've selected our waveforms and tweaked the oscillator effects to create this preset. But right now, the overall sound is a little too bright, brittle, and well, it's kinda uninteresting. That's okay, because in the next video, we're going to learn how to use the filter and amp to shape our sound to create a more modern and futuristic chord sound. Alright, in this video, I'm going to show you how to use the amp envelope and the filter section to create a shape and tone for the synthesizer sound. So we'll start with the amp envelope over here in the Mod Sources tab. And I'll start by lowering the sustain all the way down. So once I do that, because the sound is now mostly attack and decay and then some release, when we shorten the decay time, we'll notice that the sound gets more plucky. And let's go ahead and soften up these chords by slowing the attack time down a little bit. And then let's extend the release just a tiny bit. Here's a quick pro tip. Set your amp envelope parameters while the MIDI clip is playing. That way you can make adjustments so it sounds best in the performance. You wouldn't necessarily want a release time that's so long that it smears over the next chord hits, making everything muddy and cloudy. So you want to adjust this accordingly while you're listening. Alright, so let's move on to the filter section here. We'll notice that in the filter section, we have two filters, which we can turn on and off here. We can select our different filter types. We can choose the slope for each curve. We can choose different modeling circuits for the filter type. So I'm going to go with MS2 here. And let's increase the resonance a little bit. And then to add a little bit of character, I'm going to add 2 dB of drive. Alright, so before we set the final destination of the filter, I'm going to lower the volume of Wavetable about 2 dB because I started to notice that on the track volume, it was starting to peak. Okay, back to the filter section. So you can turn on a second filter by turning it on there. And you can run the two filters in either serial, parallel, or split. So for this example, we're just going to use the one filter, so I'm going to turn this one off. Alright, so let's go ahead and turn the filter down to about 88 Hertz to mask a lot of the high frequencies. And I bet you thought it sounded pretty cool when the filter was moving around. Well, you're in luck. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to create movement in the filter by using the modulation matrix to route an envelope to control it. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Wavetable's modulation matrix to create movement in our synth sound. The matrix allows you to assign modulation sources such as envelopes and LFOs to parameters in the synthesizer. Let's start by adding some movement in our filter by assigning envelope 2 to control the filter. So we'll start by clicking on the matrix tab, and to get a parameter to populate in the matrix, we just need to click on it. It's pretty easy. And then if we want to assign a modulation source such as envelope 2, we just need to find where they line up in the matrix. Then we can choose to either give it a positive or a negative value, which will move the filter in this case in different directions. So in this case, I want to move the filter open with envelope 2, so I'm going to add a positive value. So you can hear now that envelope 2 is causing the filter to open up. So let's take it one step further and adjust some of the settings on envelope 2. So one way to get there is we could click on Mod Sources and select envelope 2 and adjust our settings there. But what I like to do is actually go back to the Matrix tab and click the breakout toggle here. So now we can see all of our envelopes and LFOs. I'm going to go ahead and close the browser real quick. And this is really handy because now we have access to all the envelopes and LFOs in one view. Okay, so I'm going to adjust the attack time on envelope 2 so that it opens up the filter a little bit more slowly. And that sounds pretty good. And I'm going to make some other adjustments to the decay here. I'm going to take this up just a tiny bit. And I'm going to take the sustain percentage down just a tiny bit. And shorten the release. Awesome. Next, I'm going to click on the slope tab here. This is going to allow you to change the curve types for the different segments of the envelope. Let's adjust the attack slope percentage and hear how it sounds. All right, let's assign a couple other modulations in the matrix so that our synth will start to sound a little more interesting and have more movement. So I'm going to assign envelope 2 to the amp so that it'll soften the sound up a bit. And let's also affect the oscillator 1 warp, but this time, let's do it with an LFO. And let's go ahead and make an adjustment on LFO 1 to slow down the rate. And now let's go to oscillator 2 and select the wave position, and let's modulate that from LFO 2. And again, let's slow down the rate of LFO 2. All right, the synth is sounding pretty dope. In the next video, we're going to add the finishing touches in the global section to make it more full sounding. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to put the finishing touches on our synth by adjusting the global settings. So all of the global settings are located over here on the right side of Wavetable. We have a volume control, a polyphonic and monophonic button. Next to the polyphonic button, you can choose the number of voices that are allocated. You'll notice that when it is switched to monophonic, the glide time is available. If you want to add some width and fullness to your synths, then I definitely recommend checking out some of the unison mode effects. So unison modes use multiple oscillators with different phases, stereo locations, or wavetable positions to provide a more full and rich sound. So let's choose shimmer for our chords. And what you're going to hear is that all of the oscillator pitches are going to start to jitter at random intervals, and the result is going to be a wider and more full shimmering type effect. Below that, you can choose how many voices you want for the unison mode, and you have an amount control to control how much of the effect you want. Next to that, we have a global time percentage here. So this is going to control all envelopes and LFO speeds. So you'll notice as I turn this to the right, you're going to hear everything in the synth kind of slow down. And when we go back to the left into the negative percentages, everything's going to get a lot faster. So let's leave it at 35%. Next to that, we have the global modulation amount. This controls how much modulation is taking place for all of the sources. So you can think of this as sort of a wet-dry percentage for the modulations in the matrix. So if we were to turn this down, we hear some of those modulation sources not having as large of an effect. And I'm going to leave it back at 100%. All right, so we're done programming our synth chord sound from scratch, and I hope you guys learned a lot about Wavetable and how to approach designing a sound. In the next video, we're going to start creating the beat for the track, and after that, we're going to learn a whole bunch of cool drum processing techniques. Alright guys, in this video we're going to write the drum pattern, but first we need to select some samples and load them into a drum rack. So let's close Wavetable and open up the browser and grab a blank drum rack. So most of the sounds we're going to use come from the core library pack. It's going to be located under samples and then drums. Let's grab a kick to start. And then let's grab 2 snares. And let's grab some percussion sounds like some tambourines. And let's grab a tom drum. And a hi-hat, because you always need hi-hats. And finally, we're going to grab a clap that was part of the included downloadable project files. All right, so now we're ready to start writing the drum pattern. Let's go. To start, I'll close the browser and then click on the clip and hit Z to zoom to selection. And let's go ahead and change the grid to 1 bar and double click to create a clip. And then I'm going to loop that clip by dragging it out there. So this is the way that I like to work. I like to start by programming a 1 or a 2 bar drum pattern and then add variations to create a longer 4 bar drum pattern or 8 bar drum pattern. So let's start. Let's change our fixed grid to 16th notes in the MIDI note editor here. And let's program in our kicks and layered snares and claps. And let's add some syncopation with these kicks here. See how it sounds so far. Cool. So let's add in some tambourines and a ghost note for the snare there and a tom drum. Nice. And so right now it's sounding a little rigid. So let's go ahead and offset some of these notes from the grid so it sounds a little more human. Human. Okay, so we'll pull the snares and claps back a tiny bit. Introduce some error into our performance here and groove. So let's offset this snare a little bit, some of these kicks, and the tom drum. Cool. Sounds pretty good. So now we have a 1-bar clip. Let's go ahead and duplicate the loop. So now we have a 2-bar clip that's looping up on the arrangement timeline. And let's go ahead and make some minor modifications here. So I'm going to remove this kick in the 2nd bar and slide this other one over 1/16th note to change the pattern a tiny bit. Cool. And I'm going to move the tom drums back just a tiny bit because they're a little bit too behind. All right, so let's duplicate the loop one more time. So now we have an entire 4-bar clip here, and let's make a modification at the end of bar 4 here. And let's go ahead and bring this kick drum down here. And I feel like this tom drum happens too often here, so on the 2nd bar, let's move this down to have it play an extra snare here. Let's see how that sounds. All right, and before we move on, I'm going to go back to Wavetable, and I want to make one adjustment to the filter slope because I feel like we should have a little bit more high frequencies coming through our synth. So I'm going to change this back to 12. Cool, so now that we got the drums programmed, let's jump into the next video and start processing the kick. Alright guys, in this video we're going to process the kick drum, and we're going to use some of the built-in features inside of the simpler device to do this. But before we start, let's do some cleanup and rename our tracks and adjust the volumes. And let's turn the chords down 3 and the drums down 2. Cool. So let's solo our track and then solo our kick drum here. So I want to emphasize that what we're about to do is not necessarily what you would do for every genre. We're doing it in this track because I want to make room for the bass that we're going to be adding in a later video. So to start, let's turn on the filter here. And what we're going to do is switch it to a high pass filter. And we're actually going to remove some of the low frequencies. And again, this is to make room for the 808 bass that we're going to add later. So I'll leave it at about 59.3 hertz there. And let's turn up the resonance a little bit. Cool. And let's select one of the filter modeling circuits. I'll choose PRD. And let's add a little bit of drive. So let's hear it without the filter. So you can hear that the kick's a little bit more distorted. It has a little bit of character, and this is okay. You might be thinking, well, why are we removing this awesome low end from this? Well, it's going to make sense when we add the bass later. So I'm also going to add a little bit of fade in here to roll off some of the attack of the kick, just to soften it up a tiny bit. And let's turn our kick volume down just one. And now let's hear our kick drum in the context of all the other drum sounds. Awesome. All right, so now we're going to move on to processing some of the other drum sounds, and in the next video, we'll work on the clap. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to process the clap sound with reverb and pedal. This is going to help it stand out in the mix more. So to start, let's go ahead and tweak some of the settings on the clap sound. So let's add a filter. We're going to switch it to high pass here and turn it down just to remove some of the low end content on the clap. And I'm going to switch to classic mode here so that we have the full ADSR controls for the volume envelope. So to start, let's solo up the clap and the track. And let's change the attack time so that the clap is a little bit softer at the beginning. And I'll move the decay time all the way up and then pull the sustain level all the way down. And to tighten this clap up a little bit, I'm going to adjust the release time so it's a little bit slower. So now let's move on to adding some reverb to this. So I'm going to use the preset Big Room. So let's add that directly to the pad so it's just affecting the clap. And I'm going to double click on the clap to just slim that up. So we're going to add a lot of reverb to this clap so it pushes it back in the mix. We're also going to keep this other snare drum, which is layered with it in the MIDI pattern, very dry so that you hear the initial dry sound of the snare drum, but you hear the reverb of the clap sound. This is a pretty cool effect. So let's get the reverb to stand out even more by adding a little bit of distortion with pedal. So I'll add this after the reverb, and we're going to change the distortion setting to fuzz. I'm going to add a little bit of gain here, which is going to add a little bit more distortion. And I'm going to pull the wet dry back to about 70%. So you'll notice that when I turn this on and off while it's playing, you're going to hear the reverb pop out a lot more. Now I'm going to use EQ to shape the sound a little bit more so that it sits in the mix because it's pretty bright in the high end. So I'm going to apply a high pass filter here to remove some of those unnecessary lows. I'm going to add a low shelf to turn down some of this low mid-range because we don't necessarily need that from the clap. And we can see that around 1K here, the sound is pretty bright from the distortion. So I'm going to turn that down also with a bell filter. And finally, I'm going to use filter number 4 here to turn down the high end even more to help the clap sit in the mix. This is going to darken up the reverb sound, and we'll be able to hear the sense of space that the clap has, but we'll keep hearing that dry snare up front. So now let's listen to it in the context of the whole drum pattern. And while I do this, I'll turn devices on and off so that you can hear the difference. So you can see here that we've taken one sound, the clap, and added a lot of reverb and then distorted that reverb to help it stand out even more. Then we shaped it with EQ. So this is cool because now the clap is going to be sitting far back in the mix, but we'll still hear the thunk and the attack of that dry snare that's layered on top of it. So the ultimate goal here is to create something where the snare and the clap sound like one sound. We're using these effects separately on the clap to create the illusion that that's actually the reverb coming from the snare, but it's not. That's going to make our mix a little bit more interesting because essentially we've created the illusion now that the reverberated signal is actually coming from the snare when it's actually coming from the clap. In the next video, we're going to add our hi-hats, and then we're going to start to tweak all of our settings within each individual drum to get the pattern sounding the best that it can. Alright, so in this video, we're going to add some hi-hats to our drum pattern, and we're also going to adjust some volumes on our different sounds so that everything sounds as even as possible. So to start, let's solo the drums. And I'm going to start by lowering the clap down here about 2 dB. Cool. And let's adjust our tambourine volume down here. And I'm going to add a little bit of a fade in here to soften up this tambourine sound. And that sounds pretty good. And let's lower the volume of our other tambourine sound. Cool. And let's lower the volume of the tom drum 2 dB also. So again, this is just so that all the sounds are sounding as even as possible. And let's go into the MIDI clip, and I want to lower the velocity of this extra snare hit here. Nice. So now let's add our hi-hat pattern. So I'll hit unfold there to show our hi-hat. And let's select the 8th note fixed grid. And let's write these hi-hats in. And while I write them in, I'm going to make some adjustments to the velocities. And then I'm going to trim some of these MIDI notes so that we can have room to start offsetting them a little bit. I'm going to create a tiny bit of timing error so that it sounds a little bit more natural. Let's duplicate that. And again, just doing some subtle velocity changes here so that it doesn't just feel like the same rigid hi-hat pattern. And let's make some adjustments. Cool, and let's duplicate that for the whole pattern. And I'm going to hit Shift Tab now, go to the hi-hat, we'll lower it down 2 dB, and we're going to add a little bit of fade in to soften up the attack a little bit. And let's hear how that sounds. So we don't want to go too far. Just a little bit. Cool. Another cool feature that you can utilize for the hi-hat pattern here is if we go to the Control tab, there's this random pan percentage. So what this is going to do is it's going to randomly pan the hi-hats, which is also going to introduce some movement in the stereo field for our pattern. Cool, that sounds pretty good, but let's dial it back just a tiny bit. Now that we've evened out our volumes and added the additional hi-hat pattern, we're going to fatten up the whole drum kit in the next video with drum bus. Alright guys, so in this video we're going to beef up our drums with drum bus. So it's located under audio effects and drum bus, and I'll drag it on so it's processing the entire drum kit. So drum bus is a combination of several different styles of drum processing techniques. So to start, let's check out the drive control here. So this is going to add input drive or distortion to the entire signal. So let's solo up the track and check it out. So I'll leave it at about 25% there. So we have 3 different buttons here for the style of drive. So we have soft, medium, and hard. And you can hear that the distortion gets a little more aggressive with each one. So we're going to choose soft. Next, I'm going to jump over to the crunch control here. This is going to add distortion to the mid and high frequencies. So I'm going to leave it at 20% there. Next, we have a damp control. This is going to work like a filter and remove some of the high frequencies. So that's a really good control if you want to warm up or darken up your drums, remove some of the high frequencies. Next, we have the transient designer. This is either going to emphasize or de-emphasize transients within the mid and high frequencies. So let's check it out. Cool. So I'm going to leave it at negative 0.24 there to just kind of de-emphasize and soften up the whole sound and make it a little bit more tight. From there, because we're adding some distortion and it is increasing the level of the entire track, I'm going to go to the output gain here and just turn that down about 3 dB to make up for that gain that was added by the distortion. Next, we have a dry-wet percentage. This is going to control how much of the signal drum bus is processing. So I'll leave it at 80% there. So the next set of controls we have is for low frequency enhancement. That's the boom control here. So this is going to add low frequencies. And we can tune what frequency it's enhancing. The decay percentage here is going to control how long the low frequency enhancement is. And below that, we have a force to note button. This is going to force the frequency control to play an exact note pitch. So this would be really good for tuning and enhancing a kick drum. So for this song, we're not going to use the boom. We're just going to use the other features inside of drum bus. Next, we have the trim control. This is going to trim or turn down the volume that's coming into drum bus. So if you need a little bit more headroom, if your sound is too loud coming into drum bus, you can turn it down here. So I'm going to turn it down -2. And then finally, let's check out the built-in fixed compressor. Cool, so it's sounding pretty good, but oftentimes when you add a processor like this to all your drums, you're probably going to have to go in and make some minor volume adjustments. So let's jump over to the session view and open up the nested drum rack and go ahead and make some of these volume adjustments. So let's expand the nested drum rack here a little bit. And I'm just going to hide the return tracks for a moment so we can see everything clearly. So let's start with the clap. So I'm going to turn the clap down a little bit. About -8 dB there. Let's turn the main snare down also. Cool. This added snare here, snare chrome mono, needs to come down quite a bit. -10 there. Let's turn down our 2 tambourines and also add some panning to them to widen our sound out. So we'll turn that one down -8, and then turn this one down probably around the same, about -7. And let's pan these a little bit. One to the left and one to the right to widen out our stereo image. Cool. And let's turn our tom drum down quite a bit because it's pretty loud. Turn it up one, so -14. And then finally the hi-hats we're going to turn down just a little bit, maybe 3 or 4 dB. Let's add a little bit of EQing to some of these sounds just to kind of finalize and tighten everything up. So I'm going to go to Audio Effects and EQ 8. We're going to start by dropping one onto the snare here. And there's one resonant frequency here that I just want to remove in our snare. So it's at about 400 hertz there, and we'll take it down just about -4 dB with a fairly steep Q. Cool, and that's just calming that down a little bit. Let's go to the kick and add an EQ to the kick. And there's a little bit of muddiness on the kick in some of the low mids, so we're gonna just remove a little bit of that. So in that 150 hertz area, it's a little bit muddy, so I'm just going to take this down a tiny bit and narrow up the Q. And that's going to make a little bit more room for our bass and make our kick not feel quite so boxy. All right, so I hope you guys learned a lot about drum bus and processing drums and a little bit about EQing also. Next, let's move on to writing the bass line. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to create our bass instrument, and we're going to do this by using an 808 sample in the sampler. Along the way, I'm going to show you how we can tune our sample so that it can be used effectively as an instrument. So let's load in a default sampler and then find our sample, which is going to be located under Packs, Drum Essentials, Samples, Drums, Kick, and then scroll way down here, whee, to Kick Sub 808 Long A1. And let's drop that into the sampler. And because we're not using rhythmic material here in the sampler that needs to be warped, let's turn warping off. And now let's create a blank MIDI clip here by double clicking. And we're going to enter in a note here at C3. And extend the note length here by hitting legato. And let's solo up the track and loop this section real quick. Hit Shift Tab again, and just for this part, we're going to turn looping off so that the sample just plays once. So simpler is always assuming that you've put a sample in it that's playing at the note C. So this sample, you can actually see they've denoted on it that it says A1, so it's probably tuned to an A. Some samples say this, some don't. So we need to verify that when we play a MIDI note, the actual output of the instrument is outputting that same note pitch, because otherwise we can start writing, it's not tuned, and it's going to be really difficult to write anything in key. So to tune our sample, let's grab the tuner device and put that on there. And I'll close the browser and we'll change the zoom here. So we can see right now, we remember we have a note playing C in here. So you'd expect a note C playing on the output of the tuner. But if we play this right now, we actually see an A. So that's problematic, because then anytime you hit the note C on your MIDI controller, it's going to actually be playing an A, which is super confusing and is going to make writing really difficult. So what we want to do is we want to tune this sample. So we do that by going to the Control tab, and we need to transpose our sample until we see it matching what the MIDI note is playing. So in this case, we need to transpose the sample until it's playing a C. And we can see that this makes a lot of sense that we transpose this sample up 3 semitones, because if we look at the MIDI clip, because the original sample was recorded at a note playing A, we tuned it up by transposing it to 1, 2, 3 semitones up to C. And again, this is because Simpler is expecting that you put a sample in it that is tuned to the note C, and because this one was tuned to A, we had to adjust for that in the transpose control. All right, so now that we have our sample loaded and tuned in our Simpler, we're ready to write the bass line, and that's what we're going to do in the next video. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to write the bass line, but let's do some cleanup before we do. So let's remove this MIDI clip here that we used to tune the instrument, and let's rename our track. And then let's move the chords track next to the bass track, and I'm also going to rename this clip. We'll just call it chords. Next, let's create a 4-bar MIDI clip here by highlighting and hitting Shift-Command-M. And now we can utilize the new multi-clip editing function in Live 10 by selecting both clips with Shift. And so now you can see that in our MIDI note editor, we can switch between editing our chords and our bass by clicking on the different loop braces, and you'll notice that those are reflected by the different colors of each clip. So we could edit the chords here, or we could edit the bass here. So let's click on the bass, and to start our bass line, let's reinforce the root note of this chord, which is E. And let's go ahead and slide that over with the arrow keys. All right, I should also mention that to hear the bass line, you'll need a good pair of studio monitors or headphones. All right, so we've got that root note in. Let's go to the next chord, and we can see that the next chord is playing B, D, and F sharp. So let's reinforce that root note also, but play it a little bit higher by adding a B to the bass line. And then we'll go up to D, which is also a note in the underlying chord. And then we're going to go all the way up to G. And this is our first unstable note, which simply means it's outside of the notes played in the underlying chord. So this is going to build a little bit of tension. and then we'll come back to B. And this is why multi-clip editing is really handy, because we can just look at the underlying chords and use those as a good starting point for writing our bass line. So let's solo up just our chords and our bass, and I'm going to highlight the clips and duplicate for the first 3 bars to just keep that same bass line. And now let's make some changes to the last bar. I'm going to reinforce the root note of the underlying chord again. So in that case, this is A, and we'll slide it over under the chord. And then I'm going to copy this same rhythm by holding Option to reinforce the root note of the next chord, which is G. And for the last note, to move the bass line around a little bit more, I'm going to move it to this B here, which is also part of the underlying chord. Cool, so let's hear what we got. All right, now that we have our bass line written, in the next video, we're going to adjust some more parameters in the instrument to make it sound even better. All right, guys, in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a sustaining bass sound using a sample. We're going to do this on the bass. So what I'm talking about here is, what if you wanted to play bass notes that just sustained for a long time? Right now, the sample is only going to play for as long as the sample is. But what if you wanted it to sustain endlessly? If you wanted to do that, you first turn on loop. So we're going to move the endpoint in and loop a section of the bass sound so that it continues to sustain, and then adjust the loop. And I'm going to hold down a note so that it'll continue to sustain, so you can see what I'm talking about. And that's cool, because now for as long as you hold the note, it's going to keep sustaining. So right now it's a little rough around the edges in the loop, so I'm going to add in a little bit of fade for the loop to smooth it out. Cool, and now we have a sustaining bass sound. So now I'm going to show you how to utilize the glide feature in Simpler to create gliding bass sounds. So to do this, we need to change the voices to 1 so that this is a monophonic instrument. And then we'll go to the Control tab and turn the glide on. And then we can adjust the glide time. So this is going to be most noted in the notes here and here. And see how they're overlapping? Well, with glide time on, they're going to glide up to that note rather than just go from one note to the next. And we'll check out how that sounds here. So right now with glide on, it's a lot smoother. And let's see with glide off. Not as smooth. You hear it jumping to those note pitches. So again, for glide to work, we need to make sure that the sample is set to 1 voice or monophonic. Then we go to the Control tab, turn on glide, and we can adjust our glide time. So this is cool because now you can create really cool 808 style bass glides. And one other important thing to note, for this to work correctly, you need to have the notes that you want to glide overlapping a little bit. All right, in the next video, we're going to process the bass so that it sounds good on any sound system. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to process the bass so that it sounds good on any system. So basically, we're going to be working to pull some more mid and high frequencies out of the bass so it'll specifically come through on laptops and phones. So to start, we're going to do some of this distortion with drum bus. So we're going to go ahead and just crank up the drive here. Cool. And we're going to add some crunch, and we remember this is going to add mid and high frequency distortion. It's helping it stand out already. I'm going to turn on the fixed compressor and lower the output volume about -6 since it's adding quite a bit of volume. And now we have our bass. Let's hear it now that the fixed compressor is added. Cool. And now you can use the dry wet percentage here to basically mix in how much of this distorted signal you want. Cool. Sounding pretty good. So let's move on next. We're going to add the utility device. And there's now this bass mono preset. And you'll notice that there is the bass mono switch here. So this is going to mono anything below this frequency. So right now we'll leave it set to 120 Hertz. If you want to hear what you're monoing, you can listen to it here with the bass mono audition button. And so we're going to leave it at 120. And the purpose of this is it's going to help center our lows in the mix and allow us to get a cleaner mix overall as we go. Next, let's add a compressor. And we're going to sidechain the bass to the kick. So I'm going to choose a 6:1 ratio, bring the attack time a little bit faster here, open up the sidechain section, turn sidechaining on. Go to the drums track, choose just the kick, pre-effects, and we'll slow the release time down, lower the threshold, and then dial the release time a little bit faster so that it's in time. So I'm looking to get just a little bit of gain reduction here. Now that we have that set, let's go ahead and lower the track volume down about -3 dB. Cool, and that sounds pretty good. So now we have our bass nice and processed and ready to go. In the next video, we're going to write the melody. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to add a melody. So to start, let's grab a blank sampler, and then we're going to load it with a sound that was part of the downloadable project files, the trap blip. And let's load that into the sampler, and we want to turn warping off. Just so you guys can review from the video on tuning, I recorded and made this sample at the note pitch of C, so we should be able to already enter in a note here for C. And it's already tuned, so we don't need to do anything. Sweet! Okay, so let's create a 4-bar clip. Let's rename our track. And let's bring our chords down because we're going to use that again as a reference for writing our melody. So I held shift there just to go into multi-clip editing mode. Let's give ourselves a little bit of room here. And let's write the melody. Okay, so let's start by selecting the melody track. And let's add in a G. And then go to the F sharp. And then when the chord hits, we'll hit E. And then come down to play B. So here's what we have so far. Cool. And that sounds pretty good, but right now, after I solo up these two tracks, you'll notice the notes are a little choppy. So we need to hit Shift-Tab. We'll go ahead and close the browser and go to the melody track and change it to one shot so that the MIDI note is going to trigger the whole sample. Cool. And let's copy that melody for the first 3 bars since the chords are repeating. And for the last 2 bars, the melody is going to play off the bass rhythm. So we'll start by reinforcing the third of the chord rather than what we did with the bass, which was reinforce the root note. And then we're going to copy this rhythm to the next chord. It's going to be reinforcing the 5th of the chord. And then for the last note, we're going to have it play E, which is the root note of the scale. So let's see what we have. Cool. And that sounds pretty good. Let's edit some of these chords to tighten them up a little bit. So I'll go back to the chords and tighten this one up. And this one at the end. All right, so now that our melody is written, we got a really nice super loop going on here with all of our tracks, and we're ready to move on to applying some EQ and filters. All right, guys, so we've got our melody written, but let's clean it up with some EQ and apply a little bit of filter drive with one of the filter modeling circuits in Simpler. So to start, we're going to use one of the analog modeled filters, SMP, and we're going to add some drive here. And let's add about 6 dB there to just give it a little bit more grit and a little bit of character, something that's going to help it stand out a little bit more in the mix. So now with the EQ, let's roll off some of the lows. And then let's apply a bell filter and find some of this mid-range that we're going to remove. So around 880 there, it's a little bit nasally, so we're going to cut some of that. Cool. And now let's lower some of these low mids with a low shelf filter here and even this out even more. And let's turn the bass down 1 and the chords down 1 and also the drums. Cool, so we've cleaned up the melody a little bit, we added some drive, and then EQ'd out some of the unnecessary frequency ranges for this sound. And we did that to brighten it up and help it cut through the mix. In the next video, we're going to take our melody sound one step further with the echo effect. Alright guys, in this video we're going to use the echo effect and do some sound design for our melody. So let's add the echo effect to the track. So to start, we're going to change the delay time from dotted 8th notes to dotted 16th notes. And we're going to subtly increase this delay offset so that each left and right signal is subtly swung. And then let's dial the feedback down a little bit so the delay isn't quite so long. And let's use the filter section here to scoop out some of the lows on the delayed signal. And we'll add a little space with the reverb control here. And we'll increase the length of the reverb with the decay percentage. And now let's widen the whole delay signal with the stereo percentage control here. And let's bring the overall wet dry down to about 20% so the effect is more subtle and not dominating the main melody too much. Cool, and that's adding some nice movement and space and stereo image. Let's add a little character to it in the character tab. We're gonna click on wobble. This is going to add randomized pitch changes to the delayed signal. Cool, so let's check it in the mix. But first, let's turn up the volume a little bit on EQ8 so that the gain coming into echo is a tiny bit louder. Cool, and you can see that that's adding some really nice character to it. It's adding some nice texture, giving it a sense of space and width. Cool, so let's check out adding some more effects to our melody sound in the next video. Alright guys, in this video, we're going to spice up our melody sound with some more effects. So to start, we're going to add the pedal device, which is going to add distortion, and this is going to help our sound stand out and be a little bit more present in the mix. So we're going to go with the fuzz setting. This is going to be a bit extreme at first, but we're going to dial back the dry wet percentage so that it's not having such a drastic effect. So a tiny amount of distortion can help sounds like this cut through the mix. And the key here is to look at the track volume and notice that although it's becoming more present, it's not turning up the volume. So next, let's add the chorus effect to widen out our sound even more. So I grabbed the chorus preset there, and we can make some adjustments on the settings here. Nice, and that's just adding a little bit of subtle width to our sound, and it's also creating a tiny bit of movement. Next, let's add an EQ8 and clean up our sound. So I'm going to turn off these extra filters right now, and we're going to use the same method that we've been using before with EQing. We're going to create a boost, and we're going to sweep through the sound to find the frequencies that we want to remove. So you can see here that around 200 to 300 hertz, the sound is a little bit noisy. So what we're going to do, rather than normally just cutting, we're going to create a low shelf filter here to remove some of these unnecessary frequencies. Nice. And while we're at it, we'll add a high pass filter and remove some of these unnecessary lows because we don't need anything much below 70 hertz on this melody. So sometimes it can be really helpful to group the effects and processing that you've added so that you can check it in and out of the mix to see if you are actually making a difference that's making the sound better. So I'm going to highlight these 3 effects that we've just added and hit Command G. And we can use the device activator to turn all of our effects on and off to see if it's making a good change. And something that I want to point out again is that we're adding these effects to create more presence in the sound, but we're not turning up the volume, and that is key. Nice, and I'm going to make one final adjustment here to cut a little bit more with the low shelf filter. All right, so it's sounding pretty good. So in the next video, we're going to jump in and start creating an arpeggiation. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to write a synth arpeggiation. So we'll start by adding a default wavetable to drop files and devices. Let's turn off our melody. We'll rename this track Synth Arp. And let's create a new clip. And let's solo the track. So to start, let's add in the root chord of the scale, which is going to be E minor. So E, G, and B. And let's make it an E minor 7th chord by adding the note D. And now let's highlight all of them and hit legato. Cool, so let's go ahead and spice this up a little bit and make an inverted chord. So I'm going to select the bottom note, E, and hit Shift and the up arrow. This would make E minor 7th first inversion. And let's go ahead and invert it again. So I'm going to select the bottom note and Shift and the up arrow. And now we have a E minor 7th in 2nd inversion. So the notes are B, D, E, G. So now, to make it an arpeggiation, or to play between those notes as a sequence, let's add the arpeggiator effect. And let's change the style of arpeggiation to converge, and let's speed up the rate. And let's turn the track down, -6. Nice, so now that we have the arpeggiation going, let's jump into the next video and create the custom synth patch in Wavetable. Alright guys, in this video we're going to design our custom synth arpeggiation sound in Wavetable. So to start, let's solo up the track and select a waveform for oscillator 1. So let's choose pulse dual and let's adjust the wave position. And now let's add a second oscillator. And let's choose FM feedback. And I'll go over to the Matrix tab and select the global time percentage control here And we're going to pull this down to shorten all the envelopes so that our sound is a little bit shorter and more plucky. And we'll leave it at -70% there. And now we're going to make some adjustments to our amp envelope to shorten this up and just tighten it a little bit more. So let's start by pulling down the sustain level. And then I'm going to adjust the decay time. And now let's adjust the attack time to soften it up a little bit. Nice. Let's add one of the analog modeled filters, SMP. We'll bring the resonance up a little bit here, so when we use the filter later, we're going to hear it a little more. And then I'm going to add some drive to subtly distort our sound and give it a little bit of character. Nice. And finally, let's jump over to the unison section, set it to phase sync, and we're going to turn up the percentage here. And just to give it a sense of space, let's add some reverb. We'll choose the preset Ballad Reverb. And let's dial the dry-wet percentage back. And then I'm going to turn on the low cut for the input processing section. This is going to filter out some of the low frequencies that are coming into the reverb. Nice, and let's check it in the mix. All right, so now that we have our last sound designed here, we're going to jump into the next video and start automating and arranging our track. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to start arranging our track and adding automation. So we're going to start with the chords here, and let's hit Shift-Z to zoom all the way out. And we're going to copy our chords here to the beginning by holding Option, and then I'm going to hit Command-D to duplicate that through bar 9. And now, let's select these two clips with Shift, and then hit Z to zoom to the selection. And then from there, to show the automation mode, we can either hit A or hit the automation mode button up here. So I'm going to extend the track a little bit. So we're going to automate two things on Wavetable. We're going to automate the filter and then the global time percentage. All right, so let's click on the filter, and then let's create a breakpoint at bar 5 by clicking, and a breakpoint at the beginning, and we're going to take the beginning frequency down to about 40 Hertz here, so it's masking some of the high frequencies. And it's going to gradually introduce them up to bar 5. So let's add this to its own automation lane. And next, let's go to the Matrix tab, and let's click on the global time percentage. So I'll add this down to its own automation lane also. And now let's create a breakpoint again at bar 5. And let's create another breakpoint at the beginning. And we're going to put this into a positive value so that the chords are longer and more sustained in the beginning. Nice. So just to clean up the sound a little bit more, I'm going to add an EQ8 and turn on a high pass filter. Move this up to about 80 Hertz just to remove some of the low frequencies. And I'm also going to add a low pass filter and bring it down to about 10K or so. Cool, so it's sounding pretty good. In the next video, we're gonna add some high pass filter automation using the auto filter. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to add some high pass filter automation using the auto filter. So let's add it to our chords track and switch it to high pass. Bring it down to about 238 hertz, and let's change the resonance, bring that up a little bit to 22, and select back on our frequency control. So let's pop it down in its own automation lane. And what we want to do with this is we're going to filter out more of the lows at the beginning of the song so that the sound is more thin, and we're going to gradually introduce them and also use the filter to create some movement to make the intro a little bit more interesting. So let's go ahead and create a breakpoint at the beginning here at 238. And then at bar 5 here, let's go ahead and bring that down just a bit to like 160. And let's create a filter sweep here from bar 4 to 5. So I'm going to click to add 2 breakpoints and hold Command to free it from the grid so it doesn't snap. And let's just bring this up a little bit here. Cool, and I'm gonna bring that down just a bit, about 600, and create a little bit of bend in the curves here. And now over the next 4 bars, we're gonna slowly reintroduce all of the low frequencies in our sound. So I'll go ahead and bring that down to about 60 hertz. Really nothing below that is gonna matter because the EQ before it is removing it anyway. Cool, so now in the next video, we're gonna automate the reverb. All right, guys, so our sound is really coming along for our intro here. So let's spice it up a little bit more by automating our send control to a reverb on a return track. So let's click on send A. We'll populate this down into its own automation lane also. And we're just gonna bring the reverb so it's sending quite a lot up to 0 there in the beginning. And by bar 9, we're gonna wanna turn the reverb all the way down. And let's bend the curve a little bit here. Cool, so let's see what we have now. So it's not quite enough reverb yet, so let's jump to the return track, and we're gonna turn up the decay time. This is going to make the reverb sound a lot longer. So let's go to about 5 seconds or so. That sounds a lot better. And let's go ahead and increase the pre-delay time so that the original sound is a little bit more separated from the reverberated sound. Awesome. So you can see how the sound is completely washed out in the beginning, but by bar 9, it comes back to the original signal. So in the next video, we're going to add our drums and create a transition with echo. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to create a drum transition using the echo effect. Let's hit S to show all of our tracks and zoom out, and we're going to grab the drums clip and copy that over from bar 5 to 9. We'll hit Z to zoom in on that. And now we're going to edit the performance a little bit for the intro. So I'm going to double click on the clip and remove the hi-hats, the claps, and the tom. So I'll hit Shift Tab. And now we're going to automate another send to a delay, and we're going to use echo. So first, let's go to our delay return track. We're going to remove the existing delay, and we're going to put echo on here. And before we change the settings on echo, let's create the automation from the track. So let's click on the B send and go ahead and make the track a little bit bigger. And I'm going to select the narrow grid and trim the clip a little bit here because I want to give a little bit of room before bar 9. This is where the delay is going to fill in this space, and then we're going to bring some other elements in at bar 9. All right, so let's automate this. So create a breakpoint and bring this up and create a curve. And let's hear what we have right now. Cool. So let's make some changes to echo. So to start, I'm going to change this to a quarter note delay. We're going to change it to a regular quarter note delay, not dotted. I'm going to take the feedback down to about 48%. Use the filter section to remove some of the lows and some of the highs. We're also going to change the dry wet to 100%, add some reverb to the signal, take the decay time down a little bit on the reverb, add a little bit of stereo width with the stereo control. And now we're going to check out the modulation tab. So I'll solo up the return track, so we're just going to hear the delayed signal here. So the modulation tab allows you to create some movement in either the delay time itself or the filter. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to this mod/filter percentage, and we're going to turn this up to 100. So what this will do is the modulation oscillator above will actually cause the filter to move around. So check it out. You can always change the rate. So let's hear it a little bit faster. Pretty cool. But in this case, we're actually not going to use the modulation oscillator located above to modulate the filter. We're going to use the incoming signal. So this is where the envelope follower comes in. So if we take this to 100%, this now means there's an envelope follower engaged, which means it's going to follow the incoming signal to cause the modulation on the filter to move. Which is pretty cool. So basically, each drum sound that's hitting is causing the filter to modulate rather than using the modulation source. So if it was set to 0, this would be coming from the modulation oscillator, which right now is at 1/32 notes. You can hear it modulating quite a bit, but we're going to go with the envelope follower so that it is just following the input signal. Let's jump to the character tab and spice this up even more. So I'm going to engage the gate section here and turn this down to about -45. So what this is going to do is it's going to say any level coming into echo that's below -45 dB is just going to be muted and not allowed through. So this is a way that you can maintain a consistent level with your delays for sounds coming in. So next, let's add some noise to our delayed signal. %, there. And let's change the morph control to about 91. And let's turn on the wobble control here, which is going to add some irregular modulation to the delay time. So it's going to simulate some old tape delay effects. And we'll just have a little bit of that here, maybe about 29%. And let's bring up the morph to about 53. Cool, and let's see how it sounds in the mix. And on the modulation tab, I'm just going to turn the modulation to the filter down a tiny bit, and we should be good to go. Alright guys, in this video, we're going to smooth out our transition with some more automation and effects. Let's start by distorting our drums with pedal. So let's add it to the track, and we're going to change it to the fuzz setting. Nice, so now the drums are sounding a lot more gritty, and we're going to go ahead and add an auto filter to smooth the transition. So to start, we'll grab the frequency control, add a breakpoint, and bring it down to about 600 Hertz. Then I'm going to create a breakpoint at the end and bring it up to open up the filter. And then add an automation breakpoint at the end to fully open up the filter for the rest of the track. So let's see what we have right now. Nice, so let's solo up the drum track and add another filter, but this time it's going to be a high pass filter. So with this filter, we're going to remove some of the low end and slowly introduce it so the transition is smoother. So we'll start at about 92 Hertz and then just automate the frequency down. And this is something I do all the time where we're using a combination of high pass and low pass filter automation to introduce sounds. And the last thing that we're going to want to do is to automate the device activator for pedal to turn off on bar 9. This way, when we bring in our drums, they won't be distorted. So basically, we're just using all these effects for this intro transition. So I'll hit Show Automation and turn our effect off on bar 9. So let's look at all our automation now so we could show this in a new lane. And let's hear it with the chords. All right, so the transition is sounding a lot better and more interesting. So in the next video, let's move on to building the next section of the song. Alright guys, in this video we're going to edit the performance and continue arranging our track. So to start, let's hit Shift-Z to zoom all the way out, and then let's copy some of the clips from our super loop that we've created over here. So I'm going to grab everything except for the synth arp, hold Option, copy that over, and then duplicate it 2 more times. Next, let's focus on the drums. So first, we want to click on the B send to turn off the automation that was sending to that delay. And then, so the song can keep progressing, we're going to remove the hi-hats from the first 2 clips here. So I'll double click on the clip, remove the hi-hat, and remove the hi-hat there. Nice, so then let's hit A to get out of automation mode, and let's trim this clip. We're going to create a little bit of silence and an edit here to introduce the melody. So to start, let's remove the melody from bar 9. So we're going to bring it in at bar 13. Let's turn the melody track on with the track activator. And now that we've created this gap here in the drums, we're going to also counter that with a subtle change in the bass. Let's go ahead and go to our bass clip, and we're going to go to this second to last note here and hit Shift and the up arrow. And that's so we can have that one bass note play an octave higher. So let's go ahead and listen to these edits in the entire mix. Nice. So you could see we're doing very simple edits here, but it's improving the flow of the song and it's making the arrangement a little more interesting. So in the next video, we're going to work on automating the chords. Alright guys, in this video, we're going to automate the chords to keep them moving and interesting throughout the arrangement. So to start, let's go to the chords track and solo it. And one of the first parameters we're going to automate is the global time percentage here for all envelopes within Wavetable. And let's hit A to go into automation mode. And we'll find our Wavetable time here. And let's bring it down a little bit. So when the drop happens at bar 9, it's going to play at about 20%. So the chords are a little bit more sustained over here at bar 5 and a little bit shorter during the drop when more things are happening. Okay, so now that we got that set, let's just create some movement throughout the chords. So I'm going to create some different breakpoints. And then let's highlight that in the automation lane and duplicate it 3 times. And let's go through and then create some minor variations just so everything's a little bit different. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up this automation breakpoint right here before bar 13. And then let's also add some reverb automation right before 13 because we added that little gap in the drums. So we are going to fill in that space by automating the send to the reverb on this last chord hit here. And it's going to sound really cool in the context of the edit that we've been making by dropping the drums out and changing the bass. Nice. So let's add some high pass filter automation towards the end of the chords here so that it'll transition nicely into the next song section. Cool. So our chords are sounding good. We've automated them and we've created some more movement and interest. And I hope at this point you guys are seeing that it's a lot of these small details that make a complete track more interesting. So in the next video, we're going to jump in and create a drum fill. Alright guys, in this video, we're going to add a drum fill to our track. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and make a slight edit to the drums here at bar 17. So all we're going to do is make a simple subtraction at the beginning of the bar here just to create a variation in the performance. So let's see how that sounds. All right, so now let's edit our clip and create our drum fill. So to start, I'm going to go to the last bar of this clip around bar 4 and remove the hi-hats. And we're going to zoom in on this last bar where we're going to create the drum fill. And let's change the grid to 16th notes. And we're going to add a kick here, here, and there. And we're going to slide this one over. And let's add an extra snare hit there. Make sure the velocity is a little bit lower. And let's see how that sounds. I'm going to highlight these 3 kicks and just bring up the velocities a little bit. And maybe create some velocity variation. And let's see how that sounds. So you can see now we have a lot of variation between these 4 different drum clips in the track. In the beginning, we didn't have the claps. The next two clips, we added the claps and the toms. This clip, we created that edit, added the hi-hats, and then created this drum fill at the end of the performance. And we did that to transition into the next section of the song. So in the next video, we're going to work on creating a reverse reverb effect with echo. Alright guys, in this video, we're going to create a reverse reverb effect using echo on our melody. So we're going to start by duplicating our melody track. And then let's go in and remove that second clip, solo the track, let's rename it. And we're going to go into the clip, and we want to remove all of the notes except for the last note. The last note is E, which is the root note of our song. And let's move that over to the beginning of our clip. Cool, so let's double click on some of these devices that we're not going to use to just slim them up. And I'm going to turn off these other effects that we had used in the rack previously with the device activator. And we're going to focus on echo. So we want to make sure that the dry wet percentage here is set to 100. We're going to crank up the reverb to 100 and increase the decay time and change the feedback percentage to about 90. So here's what we have now. Nice, so we have this really long tail, and this is going to be great when we can reverse it. It's going to build some tension to lead into the melody part. So we want to render this effect to audio so that we can reverse it. So we do that by right-clicking and choosing Freeze Track. Once it is frozen, we can then choose to right-click again and select Flatten. Now that it's flattened, we can see that it's in audio. Let's remove that second clip and reverse this one by hitting R. And now let's move it into place right before bar 13 here. And let's zoom in and trim the clip and add a fade. So trim the clip there, move it over, trim the other side of the clip, and we will add a fade. And let's turn the volume down about -4, and let's see what we have. And that sounds pretty good, and you can see how it's leading into the melody and it's building some anticipation. Nice, so let's grab an EQ real quick to put on the track. So grab EQ8, and we're just going to add a high pass filter to remove some of the lows. And then we're going to add a low pass filter to remove some of the highs. And I'm using both of those filters on the EQ to help it blend more into the track, because I don't really want it to be in the forefront since it's not one of the main elements. It's just meant to be a transitional element. So now you know how to create a reverse reverb effect using echo. In the next video, we're going to automate and arrange the breakdown. Alright guys, in this video we're going to automate and arrange the breakdown. So to start, we're going to copy our chords over into our breakdown, which is going to start at bar 21. But before we do that, let's turn on the lock envelopes button so all of our automation will stay intact. So we're going to hit Command D to duplicate that, and the next thing that I'm going to do is double click on the clip, hit Fold, and we're going to remove all the notes except for the first chord. And then let's highlight the chord and hit legato to make it the full length of the breakdown. Cool. So now I'm going to automate the global time amount for all envelopes on Wavetable up to 100%. This is going to cause them to be a lot more slow evolving and sustained. Pretty cool. And while we're at it, let's name our filter here. So we're going to name this high pass filter. And let's add just a tiny little filter sweep up toward the end of the track there. Not a whole lot, just a little bit. Yeah, that's perfect. Let's move on to the drums. So we're going to copy this drums clip over, and we're going to make a couple edits here. So we're going to remove the claps. We're going to remove the toms. Dunk. And change the grid to 16th notes, and we're going to add an extra kick there and take the velocity down a little bit just to create a subtle variation. It's all about the subtle variations. Woo! Okay, so from here, let's automate our distortion back on with pedal. So I'm going to automate this on here at bar 21, and then let's go ahead and rename our filters. HPF for high pass filter, and LPF. That's going to be easier to read in the automation lanes. We're going to create a tiny filter sweep here for the drums so that it leads up to the breakdown and removes a little bit of the energy, a little bit of the low end. We're going to keep those automated at about 115 Hertz just to remove some of the low end. And we'll do the same thing here. We're going to add just a little bit of a filter sweep toward the end of the drums. And let's automate this low pass filter here. So we're going to start by creating 2 breakpoints there and start the first one maybe at about 700 Hertz, 780. That ought to be good. And let's move our filter open maybe to about 7K, not fully open, so it doesn't reveal all of those awesome high frequencies, which will later be revealed in the drop. Then let's copy our drum fill here and move that over to the end, and we will need to remove those pesky claps again. So now let's see what we got. Oh, and while we're at it, let's add this sound effect reverse. All right, let's see this from a little bit before so we can hear the transition. So our breakdown is coming along really nicely. And in the next video, we're going to add the synth arpeggiation and do some automation with the Erosion device to create even more suspense and tension before the second drop. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to add the synth arpeggiation to our breakdown, and we're going to learn about the Erosion device. All right, so let's grab our clip and then copy it over to the breakdown. And let's automate the filter to gradually introduce some of the high frequencies. And this already has a reverb inserted on the track, but why not? Let's go ahead and automate the send A to our other reverb, and let's just do it full blast there. Nice, so it just has a little more reverb tail on it there, and that's going to come in handy later when I show you a cool trick with the auto pan effect. But for now, cool, so now let's check out the Erosion device. So it's under Audio Effects and Erosion. So Erosion acts like distortion. With this sine mode here, what's going to happen is the incoming audio signal is going to get modulated by a sine wave, which is going to cause distortion. So let's check out how it sounds when we turn up the amount here. Sounds pretty cool. So let's automate this. And let's have it start at the full amount and come down to about 20. So let's check it out. Yeah. Nice. So you can see how it's adding a little bit of digital distortion and character to our sound. In the next video, we're going to edit the second drop. Alright guys, in this video, we're going to edit the second drop. So to get started, we're going to copy over the first drop here from 13 to 21. And let's move all this other stuff out of the way. Cool. So to start, we don't want it to be exactly the same as the first drop. That would be kind of lame. So we're going to edit this up to make it different. So to start, we're going to switch these drum performances. So just reverse that. So the first one has those hi-hats coming in. And we're going to do a cool little trick here with the melody where we're going to kind of introduce the melody but not go into it, and then we're going to bring in the synth arp. It's going to be dope. So let's trim our drums back here to start at bar 26, and the same with the bass. We're also going to chop out this first chord and let the melody play that first part. So it's kind of like a fake out. It's like, here's the melody again, but not really. And then we're going to bring in the arp. So here's what we have so far. So let's keep going here. Let's take the hi-hats and let's copy those to make 16th notes. And let's create a couple variations here. Remove the ones on the downbeats here and the hats that are hitting on the snares. And let's go ahead and remove the hi-hats here and here when that other snare is playing also. So let's listen to what we have now. Cool, so now let's get the synth arp in there. So we'll start by duplicating the clip. We're going to want to change some of the automation parameters here. So let's turn that reverb automation off. We're going to move this clip over so it gives room for the melody. Trim the clip. And we are going to want to go into Wavetable and probably adjust the filter here. And let's see what we have now. Nice. And this thing is crazy loud, so I'm going to turn that down to about -12. While we're at it, let's adjust the volume of the chords. -6, and the bass, take that down 1, -5. And let's keep going with the synth arp here. So I'm going to copy the chords down. So edit that with Command E and copy those chords down, double click, take them up 1 octave and hit legato. So let's see what we have now. Nice. And we're going to keep it going even further. We're going to copy the whole chords clip here. Double click on that. Highlight with Command A, up 2 octaves. 1, 2, legato. And we're going to make some edits to the performance here so it isn't just the same thing. So I'm going to highlight the notes playing B here, and we're going to shift those up an octave. And we are going to copy all of these B notes up to D. We'll go to the end of the chord. We want to remove these top two notes because these are too high. And we are going to shift these two notes here, E and D at the end of the bar, down one octave. And again, really what we're doing here is we're just creating different inversions, different patterns for the arpeggiation to play. So let's hear what we have now. Nice, so it's sounding pretty good. The synth arp isn't quite dialed in yet, but that's what we're gonna do in the next video. We're going to resample the synth arp. We're gonna get it to fit in the mix a lot better, and we're gonna move on with the track. So let's do it. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to resample the synth arp. But first, let's go ahead and make some changes to the automation on the track. So I'm going to hit A for automation mode. First one we want to go to is the erosion amount. And we're going to change this so that there's no effect here at bar 26 and that it builds up to about 70 over the course of the performance. So again, this is just to modulate it so there's some interesting changes in the sonic texture over time. Next, let's go to the filter. I want the filter to be pretty much all the way open here, allowing most of the high frequencies through. We're going to create a subtle build here in the filter opening up. So it introduces some more high frequencies and builds energy in the track. And then we're going to have it come back down to about 5.73K and then have it filter down a little bit more toward the end of the track here, and this is just done to make room for the melody up top. All right, and let's adjust our sends here. So we want to automate this from bar 31 to 33 all the way up to the reverb so that it will create a nice transition to the end of the song. And we will click on the B send and then do the same thing. So from bar 31 to 33 here. So we'll create that automation there to the B return to create a little bit of a delay tail also. Now that we've done that, we're ready to resample the track. So I'm going to hit A to get out of automation mode. So resampling means that we are recording this MIDI performance and the effects down to an audio track. So to do that, we need an audio track. So I'll hit Command T. We'll name this Synth Arp. Also, we want to show the inputs and outputs section and select resampling. Then we're going to want to record enable the track. We should make sure that no other tracks are record enabled so we don't accidentally record over them. And we want to solo the Synth Arp MIDI track. And this is because the process of resampling, when we select this for the input of a track, it's going to record whatever is going through the master track. So this will record all of the send and return automation from the reverb and the delay tracks. So to record that, we just hit the arrangement record and let it play out. So from here, we're going to want to delete the old MIDI track. I know it's kind of scary. You're like, but what if I want to make a change? This is a good commitment to make because you're saying, nope, we're just going to work with what we got and move the track forward. This will help you finish tracks faster because it's just committing to the idea that you had and moving forward with it. So I'm going to turn resampling off for the input and just set it to no input there. Now I'm going to use the fades on the clip to just create a nice fade in and a fade out toward the end of the track here. Cool. So now we are ready to add the auto pan device to this track to create a cool effect. So auto pan typically, when we raise the amount control here, will change the sound from the left to right speaker. You'll notice in the display here, the blue line is indicating the left channel or the left speaker, and the yellow line is the right channel or the right speaker. The rate control next to that will change how fast it moves from left to right. So the interesting thing though that we're going to do with this effect is we're going to use it just to modulate the volume, not have it switch from left to right channel. So if we turn the phase down to 0, you'll notice now that when we play it, it turns down the volume of both the left and the right channel at the same time, essentially just becoming a way to modulate volume. So from here, I'm going to select a synced rate and then set it to 16th notes. So this will create an interesting rhythmic pattern on top of our 30-second note performance. You're also going to hear in here with the reverb tail, because we resampled it, and this is one of the reasons we did that, is you're going to hear this cool effect that it's going to be creating on top of the reverb tail, which is going to be really cool. So this is going to help to tighten up the performance, make it so that this synth arp is not taking up quite so much room, which is pretty important because it's such a busy sound. So let's hear it in the context of the mix. And what I might do here is just raise the clip volume up by double clicking and take this up maybe 3 dB. Nice, and that's a really cool effect. In the next video, we're going to edit the bass performance. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to edit the bass performance in the second drop. So to start, let's double click on this clip. And in the MIDI note editor, let's change the grid to 8th notes. And we're going to trim this first note here, add another note, and take it up an octave. So let's see what we have now. Pretty simple. Let's hear it in the mix. Cool. So now let's go to the end of the performance and let's change this second to last note here, which is G, up an octave. Nice. So now the next thing we're going to do is add an auto filter to the track. And we can go ahead and remove the tuner. And while we're at it, we can get rid of all of this stuff out here from our super loop that we built at the beginning of the track. Let's go back to the auto filter. So we're going to want to set this at about 90 Hertz and change it to a high pass filter. So we're going to create some filter automation at the end of the performance at bar 32 to remove some of the low end in the bass. This is going to help the transition to the end of the track. So what we want to do is right click on the device activator for the auto filter and I'll hit show automation. And first we want to bring our automation line down so it's off for the rest of the track. And then we can hit B to go into draw mode, and we can draw in our automation there for the bass to turn on. So let's see how that sounds. Nice, and I'll go ahead and remove that last automation breakpoint there. So you can see it's just turning the filter on toward the end of the track, removing some of the lows, creating a better transition and letting the listener know that a transition is about to happen. In the next couple videos, we're going to keep working on the transition to the end of the song, but specifically in the next video, we're going to work with filtering the chords. Alright guys, in this video we're going to add some more filter automation to our chords. So let's go to the chords track and find this auto filter here, or we can find it down in the automation lane here, either one. So we're going to filter the chords a little bit more when this first chord happens here. So let's solo the track and draw in some automation. So I'm going to raise the filter so it's a little more filtered at the beginning. Maybe in just a tiny bit higher. Nice. And let's add some reverb automation to it also. Not a whole lot, just a little bit. Maybe even down just a tiny bit from that, maybe negative 21.7. Woo! Cool. And we're going to just create a little bit of filter movement here, removing some of the lows toward the end of the bar. And we're going to add a little bit of reverb automation again. And we're going to start filtering it slowly, create a bend in the automation curve there and bring it up just a tiny bit more toward the end of the track here. And let's automate the ascend to the reverb here. Nice. And at the end of the track, let's also automate the low pass filter on Wavetable down a little bit so that it gets a little bit darker at the end. Nice, so let's see how it sounds in the track. Nice. I'm going to move this automation for the ascend just a little bit to the left there so it gets some more of that reverb at the end of the track there. So you can see a lot of these movements are pretty subtle, but it's going to add a little bit of movement, sweeping out some of the low end. So you can see specifically I am filtering more when it's starting to send to that reverb on the return track. Cool. So in the next video, we're going to add a drum fill to the outro. Alright guys, in this video we're going to add a drum fill to the outro, and we're also going to automate some of the other parameters on our drum track. So let's go up to the drum track, let's solo it, and we're going to focus on bar 32 here. So to start, let's split the clip and jump in, and we're going to remove the kicks and the claps. And we are going to add an extra snare here. So let's change the grid to 16th notes. Add our snare in there. Make sure the velocity is down quite a bit. And let's offset it just a tiny bit. So now let's focus on the automation. So to start, we're going to turn the distortion back on. So we are going to automate pedal. So we can hit B, go into draw mode, and turn this on for this last bar here. And let's go over to the low pass filter and we'll automate that down. And we're gonna start it a little bit before the distortion turns on. And let's see how that sounds. Nice, and let's see how it sounds in the mix. Nice, and I'm going to bring this up just a tiny bit, and this one at the end too. So you can see we're at that point in the track where we're adding a lot of subtle details, but these things are what make a professional track stand out. In the next video, we're going to start to clean up some of our transitions even more. Alright guys, in this video, we're going to add a transition to the outro of the song. So let's press A to get out of automation mode, and then let's hit S to show all tracks and hit Shift Z to zoom all the way out. So we're going to add our sound effects reverse here to the transition right before bar 33. And then we're going to zoom in and we're going to duplicate this clip and we're going to reverse it with R. And we're going to readjust the fade here so that the sound effect reverses and then goes back to normal, smoothing out this transition. So let's see what we have. Pretty cool. Let's check it real quick in the track. Nice. I wanted to add another sound effect for the beginning transition, and that is found in the samples folder that's part of the included downloadable project files. So it's called SFX Riser, and it's going to go on its own track right before bar 9. So let's trim this up and add a fade and see how it sounds. Nice. And let's go ahead and copy that over to the transition right before the breakdown also. And just to do a little cleanup, let's rename the track. Let's close it up. And let's go ahead and highlight all of our tracks. I'm going to hit Shift Tab and click in the clip info box here, hit delete, and that is just going to remove all of the clip names so we have a cleaner looking interface. Cool, so in the next video, we're going to balance out the mix and make any final adjustments before mastering. Alright guys, in this video, we're going to balance the mix and apply EQ and compression and volume balancing as necessary. So to start, we're going to make one change to the bass performance first here in the second drop. So I'm going to click on this clip and we're going to go to the second note here, E, trim that, add an extra note and highlight the first one. Shift that up an octave just so it's doing the same thing as it was at the beginning there. And we're going to do the same thing for the second clip. Click on the piano roll to select them all, trim, copy, octave. Cool, so now let's get on with the mixing adjustments. So to start, I'm going to lower the volume of the drums to -6 dB. Then we're gonna make some individual changes to some of the sounds in our drum rack. So I'm gonna go to hi-hat chives and the volume control, and we're gonna turn that down to -20. It's a little bit loud. We're gonna go to the tambourine British and turn that down about 3 to -19. And then we're going to focus on the clap. So to start, I'm also going to turn that down to -16. And we're going to take a look at the EQ here. There's still a little bit of harshness coming through on the top end here. So I think it's around 2.37K or so. Let's take a listen. Let's solo the track. So you can hear how it's a little bit too harsh right there. So we're gonna go ahead and remove that by taking it down -3.6. And let's go ahead and adjust the Q value a little bit. And there we go. So that's just gonna reduce some of that harshness on the clap there. So let's close up our drum rack and let's slim up all these other devices. And we're gonna add an EQ8 to the whole track. So to start, let's remove some of the unnecessary lows. We'll go ahead and leave it at 30 Hertz there. And then we're gonna see if we can remove some mud on this track. So to start, we'll create a bell. We'll create a boost, about 6 to 8 dB, just like we normally do. And then we're gonna sweep through. Yeah, and right around 235, it's starting to sound pretty muddy in there. So we're gonna reduce this, -4.35. And let's tighten up the Q a bit. Let's go with 1.38. Cool, there's also something a little overemphasized on the kick. Yeah, it's around 110, 111 Hertz there. It's kind of the top end of the kick drum, so we're gonna take that down just a little bit, -1.36, and take the Q value, make it kind of narrow. We don't want to remove too much energy from the kick there. Cool, let's see if we can find anything else. Yeah, there's a bunch of fun stuff around the mid-range there, around 808 Hertz. We're going to remove quite a bit of this actually to make room for the chords and the melody in the song. So let's take these down, maybe -4, and let's adjust our Q, maybe widen it out a little bit. And this is overall just to balance the mid-range on the drums. Also, there's just kind of a weird popping sound going on here. And we're gonna add another bell here because I heard some harshness up on the top end. And it's around 3K here. Yep, that's a little harsh on the ears. So let's go ahead and remove that. Take it down -2 and adjust the Q. And then we're gonna overall just lower the high frequencies on the drums, and we'll just take it down maybe about -1.6 and adjust the Q a tiny bit. Okay, so because we've cut a lot of volume with the EQ here, we want to use the gain on the EQ here to add some of that volume back so that we can properly A/B our device on and off and see if what we're doing is better. And it's just a lot more balanced to me with those cuts, sits better in the mix and isn't quite so boxy and mid-rangey. So we're gonna add a compressor really quick. We're gonna add the glue to our track. So I'm going to set the attack time faster there to clamp down on the transients, and the release time fairly quick so that the compressor recovers in time. And let's lower the threshold to where we get maybe about 2 dB of gain reduction. So we can see there that the needle here is showing the gain reduction. It's hitting about 2 dB, so I'm going to make that up on the makeup gain, and we're going to turn on soft clipping there. Nice, it's super subtle there, but it's helping to tame some of those transients and bring a little bit more life to the drums. Okay, so let's move on to the bass track. So we can slim up these devices that we're not using, and let's go ahead and add an EQ8. While we're at it, let's turn the drums down. I'm going to turn them down to -9, and let's add our EQ. So to start, we're going to cut some of the lows again, but this time just at 20 Hertz. We're not going to hear that stuff anyway. So we're going to apply a low shelf here to lower some of the bass. And let's go down to -3 and turn the Q up so it's a little more narrow. So again, what I'm doing here is just lowering the low end just a tiny bit, balancing the sound out so the top end will come through a little bit better also. And let's add another bell. Nice, so I'm gonna cut a little bit at 267 there. All right, so we applied a low shelf to lower some of the lows of the bass, and we applied a bell filter there to remove some of the mud. Let's move on to the chords track. All right, so the chords are a little bit heavy in the low mids right now. And we're gonna wanna make some room in the mids and high mids for the melody to come through. So we're gonna start by applying a low shelf filter and remove some of the low mids here. Cool, and then we're gonna use a bell and remove some of these high frequencies. Again, the 1 to 3K range is where we hear the best, so that is often the most tricky, especially in a song like this where there's so much going on in the mid-range. All right, we're just removing some of that harshness. Again, making room for the clap sound, making room for the drums, and most specifically and importantly, we're making room for the melody. And let's adjust the track volume. We're gonna turn it down to -8. Okay, let's go to the melody track. And we're gonna close up all of our devices and add a final EQ. And we're gonna use a low shelf here just to rebalance the sound. We're gonna place this kind of high. We're gonna turn this down about 4 dB. And we're gonna keep this Q pretty broad. So we're just lowering some of those lows. And now we're gonna add a bell filter here, around 600 Hertz here. You can see it's getting pretty scratchy and pretty noisy. So we're gonna reduce this by about 4 dB. And we're gonna adjust the Q. We're gonna add another point and find this top end here. and adjust that to remove some of those higher notes. Nice, and let's go ahead and add a glue compressor. We're going to have the attack be pretty fast to clamp down on the transients. Release time of 0.4. We're going to lower the threshold down to where we see only about 2 dB of gain reduction. Nice, so let's check everything together. So let's add some quick EQs to the sound effect reverse. Oh, we already got one there. So sound effect reverse. We're just going to reduce some of those peaks there. Cool, tame that down. For the synth arp, we're going to keep it pretty easy. We're just going to add a low cut. And we're going to do the same for the sound effect riser. Nice. And let's go ahead and make some volume adjustments here. Turn the synth arp down, -4.5. The sound effect reverse track's going to go down to -8. Awesome. So let's see how the track is sounding. Nice, and you can see some of those EQs are really making a big difference there. So in the next video, we're going to apply EQ to the whole song. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to apply EQ to the whole song. So we're going to add EQ8 to the master track. And we're going to go through the same process we went through on the individual tracks. We're going to sweep through, find problems, and then remove them. So let's start by adding a very standard low cut. So we're going to set that at 20 Hertz just to remove the frequencies we're not going to hear anyway. And that's going to remove some of that ultra low end, and it's going to give us a little more headroom in the mix. So now let's add a bell and create a 7 dB boost and sweep through and see if we can find our first problem and then reduce it. So there seems to be a lot of stuff building up at 681. So I'm going to cut this by about 2 1/4. And I'll adjust the Q a little bit. We're going to keep it fairly wide here. A lot of the EQing that you're going to see on the master here for this song specifically are going to be to clean up the mid-range here. We added a lot of chords, melodies, drums. There's a ton of high frequency and mid-range stuff going on here. So we're going to balance it out. And the goal is to have a mix that's as even and flat as possible. So let's see if we can find our second problem. So we'll create another bell here, create a boost, and let's sweep through. So up here around the 4.74K range, it's starting to get a little bit harsh. So I'm going to remove this, not a whole lot, maybe -0.8 8.5. And let's adjust the Q, keeping it pretty narrow there, just removing a little bit of this harshness up here. Cool, so let's keep going. We'll add another bell. And there's a bit of a buildup here in this 2K range, so we're going to remove that. This is, again, the range that we hear the most. It makes the mix feel like it's really up front. So we're going to reduce some of this 2K range here, and it's going to help balance the mix a bit more. So let's take it down about -1.75, and I'll adjust the Q. Cool, things are sounding good. So let's check out what's going on in the low mids here. So a lot of the drum sounds are building up there around 278 hertz. So I'm going to remove that a little bit, also by about 1.5 dB, and I'll adjust the Q. Nice, so I'm going to add another filter here. We'll move it down, and there's that same area around the kick here. It's around 111 hertz, building up around the top end of that kick. So I just want to remove some of that. I'm going to take about a little over 1 dB there, and I'm going to adjust the Q, make it a little bit more narrow so it doesn't take away too much of that nice low end. And this is where we can use the global gain on EQ8 here to add back some of that lost volume. So I'm going to add about 2 dB back. So this is going to allow us to A/B the device on and off and check the results better, because if we didn't make up for that gain, our EQ'd version probably wouldn't sound as good because it just wouldn't be as loud, when in actuality it's a little bit more clean and clear. So you can hear that when the EQ is off, the track's a little more flat. It's a little bit more in your face. It's kind of boxy, a little bit nasally. And that's because the mid-range was off. So this is why mastering is super important. We add all these elements in the track, and when they start combining together, we still need to make some adjustments to make it sound the best that it can. So I want to point out here too, there's the scale feature, which scales all of your filters at once. So we're going to keep it at 100%, but I wanted to show you that feature because it's really useful in a lot of situations. Cool, so we're done EQing our track, and in the next video, we're going to center the lows in the mix. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to center the lows in the mix, and we're going to do this using the updated utility device in Live 10. So there's this awesome preset called Bass Mono, and we're going to place it before the EQ. So you'll notice now that the utility device has been updated. There's a lot of awesome features, like the gain control goes to -infinity. We remember now in Live 10, you can double click to reset a parameter to its default. But we have now a mono switch, so we could mono the whole signal, which we definitely would not want to do on the master track here. But below that, with the bass mono preset or with the utility device, if you turn it on, you can choose to mono below a specific frequency point. So essentially, everything below 120 hertz is in mono. You can use the bass mono audition button here to hear what is being monoed. So using the bass mono preset here is going to help center the lows in the mix. This is going to help it translate to larger sound systems, and it's also going to be helpful just to balance the mix a tiny bit more. So in the next video, we're going to check out how to use the Glue Compressor on the master track. Alright guys, in this video we're going to use the Glue Compressor on the master track. So let's go ahead and add the Glue Compressor default, and we're going to flip open the sidechain section. Now we're not going to use any of the sidechaining parameters, we're not going to sidechain the master, but we are going to use the EQ section here. So the EQ section here is going to filter the signal that triggers the compressor to turn on. Now, this is pretty key. So again, I'm going to say it again. It filters the signal that triggers the compressor. So this is basically saying only frequencies above 200 hertz, because this is a high pass filter, are going to trigger the compressor to start reducing gain, rather than the full frequency spectrum. So basically what's happening here is the kicks and the basses aren't as likely to trigger the compressor to turn on. So by using the EQ, you're not making the compressor work as hard, because usually the frequencies that cause the most gain reduction are the low frequencies. So in this case, you're saying, okay, well, only those frequencies above 200 hertz are going to trigger the compressor to start working. Now, it's very important to understand this does not put it in any sort of multi-band mode. This does not mean you're only compressing above 200 hertz. It just means you're filtering the signal that's causing the compressor to react. So for our settings here, we want to set the attack time a little bit slower to 3 so that we can let some of the transients through. And we're going to adjust the release time a little bit faster so it can recover quickly. And I'm going to lower the threshold until I see about 2 dB of gain reduction on the needle here. And let's make up the 2 dB on the makeup gain there for the amount of volume we're reducing. So now I want you to see what happens when I turn the EQ off. You're going to see a lot more gain reduction, because right now the kick and the bass is not triggering the compressor to turn on. So let me turn this off and let's see how much gain reduction there is. Right, so there's almost 5 dB of gain reduction there, but when we turn this on, hear how much muddier it sounds when it's off? It's because all of the kick drums and the basses, the full frequency range is triggering it to turn on, and the compressor's like, whoa, we got to turn all this stuff down, and the whole mix suffers because of that. So you can see how using this on the master can be super awesome. It's making our track more clear, whereas when it was off, it was a little bit muddier. I hope you guys understand again that this is only EQing the signal that is triggering the compressor to turn on. The compressor still compresses the entire range, but through doing this, we're getting a cleaner and a louder sound. So in the next video, we're going to check out how to saturate the mix. Alright guys, in this video we're going to saturate the mix. So let's grab the default saturator, and we're going to add 2 dB of drive here. And then we're going to slowly turn up the dry wet percentage here while we listen to it. Let's set it to the saturator setting of soft sine. And now we're going to increase the dry wet percentage here. So we're going to hear the mix get louder. It's going to get a little bit of edge. It's going to get a little bit warmer. So you have to be careful that if you add too much of the dry wet percentage or too much saturation in general, sometimes it can do some funky stuff to the mix. So let's check it out. Nice. So I'm going to leave it at about 30% there. It's just giving it a little bit of warmth, giving it a little bit of edge, and it can make the track feel more connected. You know, it's tempting to just put it at 100%, but after careful listening, it can alter your entire mix quite a bit, so you want to be careful with that one. That's it for the saturator. I recommend checking out some of the other saturation types in the menu here. Experiment with that on individual tracks in the master, and in the next video, we are going to add the final thing in the track, which is the limiter. We've made it. Woo! All right, let's check it out in the next video. All right, guys, in this video, we're going to add a limiter to the master track to finish the song. So we'll grab the default limiter, and what we're going to do is we are going to boost the gain into the limiter until we see anywhere between 0 and 3 dB of gain reduction on the meter over here. So let's play the track and we'll adjust the gain as we need to. So you can see that as we brought the gain up, it started to limit some of the loudest peaks. So you can experiment with boosting it more, seeing more gain reduction and potentially getting a louder track, or you can back off a little bit. But that's a good range to start out in, 0 to 3 dB of gain reduction. When you start to get past 6 dB of gain reduction, that's definitely a lot of gain reduction, so you might make some adjustments in the track. Cool, so we've finished our track, and in the next and last video, we're going to export the song. All right, guys, this is the last video in the course, and we're going to export the final song. So I hope you guys learned a lot about Live 10 and music production. We're always interested in your feedback and learning about ways that we can improve and make better courses for you guys. So if you want to leave a comment in the video below or contact us directly via email, we'd be glad to hear from you. So one last thing before we export here, I noticed that the automation on this filter for the drums was a little bit sharp, transitioning into the end of the song. So I'm just going to adjust the filter so it filters down a tiny bit more so it won't be so harsh as it crosses over that frequency range. And let's check it in the mix. Maybe up just a tiny bit. And let's add a little curve here. Cool, and that's done it. There's always some small detail. In reality, there's actually a lot of details that go into making a professional sounding song. So let's hit Shift Z to zoom all the way out. Let's highlight our selection and let's export our song by hitting the quick key, Shift Command R to open up the export window. And you'll notice the new feature that we have in Live 10 is the ability to encode MP3s. So for our settings, for the wave encoder, we're going to choose wave. So for our export settings, we're going to choose wave, 16-bit, and we are going to also create an MP3. And we'll just hit export. and export our song. Cool, so that's it. We've finished and exported our WAV and our MP3. So I just wanted to thank you guys again. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope to see you back here at Sequence 1.